Hello, it's Phil at digitaldjtips.com. This is the Reloop Neon accessory controller for Serato. Now I've been testing it with a very simple Serato controller, the Numark Mixtrap Pro 2, not an expensive device, and my copy of Serato. I've had the pair of them plugged in and I've been messing around with it all morning. So now I can tell you why you might want to go for a little controller like this in addition to either a basic controller or a digital vinyl system if you're using Serato DVS alongside your existing mixer and decks or mixer and CDJs. So let's take a closer look at what is in this new controller. Well, the big thing really that takes the lion's share of the marketing speak, and quite rightly so, is the sampler. The sampler is controlling the SP6 sample player within Serato DJ, and the stuff it's got on here, the two things really are the fact that the pads, they're full RGB pads, but they're also touch sensitive. It's switchable, so you can have them just go on and off if you want, but they're touch sensitive, and that means you can use them as drum pads and put different drum sounds in here and play drums with it. But also in the SP6 sample player in Serato, there are all these lights for toggle, one touch, and full sample playing. That's what the three lights here are. By holding mode here and pressing it, I can switch between those. I can also turn on the sample looping and I can turn on sample syncing as well. And all these lights above each individual sample slot tell me how that sample slot is set. This is the only controller that's ever done that to date that I know of anyway. By holding down the sample pad and turning this knob, you can alter the sample volume for the individual samples. You can also do it for the whole lot. And then you can select the samples here in 4 banks across all 6 slots. These 2 slots are unused in sample mode. It's a really good implementation of the SP6, the best I've seen anywhere. An equally good implementation, by holding down the shift button and pressing the sample button, you activate the one underneath, which is Pad FX. That gives you 3 individual effects and the multiplier or divider for the beats on each of the 2 engines, each of the 2 effects engines. And by using the velocity, i.e. by holding down the pad harder or softer, it's like turning the depth or turning the parameters. So it's quite clever the way that works, and you can switch it between either you can have 3 effects there and 3 effects there in simple kind of daisy chained mode, or you can have 2 effects controlling up to 3 parameters of each. And by holding down shift and pressing these, you get to switch your effects and also toggle them. So that's the pad effects. These are quite a clever way of getting what would be normally put onto knobs to work on a pad system. I thought that was quite good. So there's a slicer here as well, which you can switch using shift into loop slicer, and it'll flash to tell you that you're in loop. I'm not going to explain slicer to you, but it is a high-end Serato function. It's certainly not there on the Numark Mixtrap Pro and on cheaper controllers. So that is unlocked using this as well. So moving on to a more universal function, the hot cues. These work exactly as you'd expect them to on any DJ controller. You've got access to all 8 cues. They're color coded alongside the colors within Serato software. So you can see the color that you set and they'll appear here as well. And holding down shift will delete your cues, just as is always the case with these setups. It's also got Serato flip mode. Now flip is a new way of basically re-editing your tracks. And again, it's on shift here. By pressing the record button there, by holding shift and pressing record and then playing a track and then juggling around it using my hot cues that I've already set, I can effectively make a new mix of that track by moving between various parts of it. I can extend the intro and the outro, take sections out. I can even use it as a kind of beat creation tool by putting lots of hot cues among, say, a 1 bar or 2 or 3, 4 bar section, and then just replaying the beats. It'll remember everything you do, including the sensor button. There's a sensor button here, and then you can assign it to a slot, and these pads will also let you play back your flips. It's a bit hard to explain, but trust me, it's a really good way of doing rough and ready remixes. And if you use the quantize function within Serato, you can get some excellent results, and you can reimagine tracks for how you might like them. Now, the good thing about Serato flip implementation on here is that it's on here. This is one of the few controllers that's actually got the hardware controls to control it and the color coding to tie in with your saved flips in the software. Again, kind of right place, right time. This is going to be in the Numark NV, for instance, in the new DDJ SX2 from Pioneer, but this is the only supplementary controller that's got this at the moment. And finally up here, we've got hot loops, where you can set your loops and save them onto these slots here. Your loop size is here. You can set your size to 1, 2, 4, 8 beats or half a beat or whatever, and you can save your loop here, and you can recall your loops really easily as well using these buttons. And then finally there's a manual loop here, which will just let you have in and out points and adjust your loop manually, just right for getting those hard to find smooth loops in tracks that haven't been beat gridded properly by the software, for instance. And as well as all of that, it's got down here there's selectors for the decks, which you can use to use the whole lot really on all 4 of your decks in Serato. There is a library selector here, which is in order to load onto one of these 4 decks, you can grab your track from here. And down here you can alter the relative, internal or absolute DVS settings for digital vinyl. There's also a sync button here, which I showed you earlier, just to sync up the sampler effects. So overall, this controller is solving 2 problems. Number 1, you've got a cheap controller like the Numark MixTrack Pro. You don't want to replace it, but you want to access all these functions. You could also use Serato Remote on your iPad, but that presupposes you own an iPad, of course. The second thing it does is let you have all of this stuff, absolutely all of it, if you're using a digital vinyl system. If you've got 2 record decks either side of here and the mixer you've had for 10 years, there isn't any digital functionality at all on there. Well, the functionality that this gives you is everything in Serato, pretty much, apart from the transport controls and the mixer. In other words, apart from the stuff you've already got on your DVS. So for both of those use cases, this kind of controller is great. I think for the money, this is easily the best value supplementary controller for Serato out there. It's very cleverly mapped, it's well made, it's going to last you a long time. It's plastic, but it's screwed together and it's going to last you. And just the functionality to price is really a no-brainer if you are a DVS user or if you are using a cheaper controller that you don't want to replace. So that's the Neon from Reloop for Serato DJ. The full review of this is over at digitaldjtips.com.